He made millions laugh, but then vanished without warning. At the peak of his fame, Larry the Cable Guy suddenly stepped away from comedy, leaving fans confused and rumors swirling. Behind the flannel shirts and catchphrases was a private struggle he never talked about publicly. Now, the real reason he quit is finally being revealed, and it's far more shocking than anyone imagined. Larry the Cable Guy's rise to national fame was neither accidental nor overnight. It was the culmination of years of relentless touring, disciplined branding, and a finely tuned comedic persona that resonated with a massive swath of American audiences. Born Daniel Whitney, he had experimented with different comedic voices early in his career, but it was the Larry character, part Southern everyman, part exaggerated blue-collar philosopher, that propelled him into the mainstream. The persona crystallized during the early 2000s and became the backbone of his breakout success on the blue-collar comedy tour, a cultural phenomenon he shared with Jeff Foxworthy, Bill Engvall, and Ron White. Together, the four comics created a touring juggernaut that filled arenas and produced multiple high-rating films and specials, establishing a new era of populist comedy. During these peak years, Whitney's work ethic bordered on punishing. He later recalled in interviews that he was on the road approximately 286 days a year for 15 straight years, a staggering pace for any performer and nearly unheard of in modern stand-up. The schedule was a machine. Fly in, perform, shake hands, fly out, then do it again the next night. The demands of the persona intensified the grind. Fans didn't just want jokes, they wanted Larry, the accent, the catchphrases, the high-energy crowd work. Maintaining that level of performance with minimal downtime required exceptional stamina and an almost industrial approach to touring. As his live profile expanded, so did his presence in broader entertainment. Hollywood began calling, first with cameo roles and eventually with leading parts in comedies such as Larry the Cable Guy, Health Inspector, and Delta Farce. While critics were often unkind, box office returns and home video sales demonstrated his substantial commercial pull. But his most enduring crossover came through voice acting, specifically the role of Mater, the affable, rusty tow truck, in Disney Pixar's Cars franchise. Mater became a breakout favorite, beloved by children and families, and Larry's warm, unpolished vocal performance gave the character emotional range beyond the joke-driven persona of his stand-up act. The franchise extended his fan base into arenas he had never touched, preschool audiences, international markets, and parents who otherwise might not have encountered his work. Television, too, became a major avenue. From Comedy Central specials to co-hosting duties and guest appearances, he leveraged every medium to reinforce the brand. His History Channel series, Only in America with Larry the Cable Guy, allowed him to step outside pure stand-up while still embodying the persona, visiting eccentric small towns, oddball American traditions, and patriotic subcultures. The show broadened his relatability and painted him as a good-natured, curious observer of American life rather than just a punchline machine. By 2015, however, the cumulative impact of nearly 2 decades of nonstop output had become undeniable. His touring empire had grown enormous, his merchandise line was vast, and his character was instantly recognizable nationwide. But the pace had been brutal. With a massive, loyal fan base behind him and lucrative franchises still active, he began speaking more openly about the toll of maintaining such a grueling schedule. The physical strain of perpetual travel, the pressure to keep the character fresh, and the challenge of balancing work with family life became increasingly central themes in his interviews. He remained grateful for the success, but acknowledged the difficulty of sustaining such intensity indefinitely. By the mid-2000s, Daniel Whitney, known worldwide as Larry the Cable Guy, found himself at a personal crossroads. After more than a decade of non-stop touring, explosive commercial success, and an entertainment footprint that stretched from stand-up to television to the billion-dollar Cars franchise, he began articulating a shift in his internal priorities. Around 2015, Whitney spoke candidly about the lifestyle he had maintained for years, and how the very machine that built his fame had begun to collide with what he now valued most: his family and his time at home. In interviews from this period, he reflected on the extreme touring regimen that defined his peak years. He often noted that his children practically grew up on the tour bus, a statement that was both literal and emblematic. From 2003 through 2015, he toured relentlessly, hundreds of shows a year, one-nighters strung across states, and a logistics schedule that resembled an endless loop of airports, green rooms, and hotel suites. He acknowledged the thrill of those years, the financial rewards, and the connection with fans, but he also underscored how grueling it was to maintain that pace while being fully present as a father. As his children approached middle school age, Whitney experienced what he described as a wholesale reevaluation of his calendar. He completely changed his schedule, scaling down road commitments that had once defined his identity as a performer. Rather than jumping from city to city with minimal breaks, he now engineered his career to revolve around home life. The transition was intentional. He did not want to be the father who missed milestones, recitals, school events, or the quieter moments of adolescent transition, the subtle, quickly passing stages that touring parents often lose to jet lag and distance. Part of this shift stemmed from pure exhaustion. Whitney admitted that even for someone who had built an empire on comedic stamina, the relentless pace had become untenable. "You get sick of the travel," he said, articulating a sentiment familiar to any veteran road comic. Travel had once been a symbol of progress and momentum. Now, it was simply draining. The perpetual motion of buses, planes, cars, and backstage corridors no longer energized him. It wore him down. The fatigue wasn't just physical, but emotional, a realization that the cost of professional output was beginning to outweigh the reward. This recalibration marked a notable evolution in Whitney's public persona as well. While he continued to perform and remained deeply connected to his audience, he became more selective about projects, prioritizing those that allowed him to stay geographically grounded. Voice acting, television segments, regional or limited-run appearances, and philanthropic work, especially through the Get Our Done Foundation, became increasingly central pillars of his career, offering professional fulfillment without the punishing road schedule. Importantly, Whitney framed this shift not as a retreat from success, but as a maturation. After years of living at maximum velocity, he had earned the right to slow down, to recalibrate, to choose engagement over sheer volume. In many ways, his story mirrors the broader arc of long-term comedic careers: the early hustle, the middle period explosion, and the later life balancing act between legacy and living well. By 2015, Whitney was determined to be present for the years that mattered most to his family, years he could never reclaim once gone. Yet unlike sensational headlines that claimed he had quit comedy, Whitney's own account of this transition was far more nuanced. He did not abandon the stage. He re-engineered his life around a new balance, trading the punishing pace of his earlier years for a schedule that allowed for longevity, sanity, and family presence. In interviews from this period, Whitney explained that after more than a decade of touring at extreme volume, sometimes approaching 300 days a year, he made a deliberate, strategic cut. Rather than hundreds of shows, miles of bus routes, and a calendar that folded into itself with little rest, he trimmed his commitments to 24 scheduled dates a year. For someone who built his empire on constant travel and arena-filling momentum, this reduction was radical. It represented not a retreat from comedy, but a structural redesign of his career. Whitney emphasized that his love for the stage itself had not faded. "I still love being on stage," he said, a sentiment that rang true for fans who had followed him since the blue-collar comedy tour era. The problem was not the performance, it was everything around it. The airports, the tour buses, the last-minute schedule changes, and the unending sequence of nights spent far from home had accumulated into a kind of logistical fatigue. As he put it plainly, "You get sick of the travel." This exhaustion was not merely physical. It was psychological, emotional, and tied to the realization that time at home was finite. His children were growing older, entering new phases of school and life, and he no longer wanted his role as a father to be relegated to FaceTime calls from green rooms. His scaled-back schedule reflected a commitment to being present for the ordinary, irreplaceable rhythms of family life. School events, homework nights, sports, and simple evenings at home that touring had previously made impossible. While media outlets seized on shorthand phrases like "Larry the Cable Guy quits comedy," Whitney himself pushed back against such interpretations. He clarified repeatedly that he had not quit. He had resized. His professional activity continued, but it no longer followed the hyper-accelerated model that defined his early and middle career. Instead, he focused on selective live dates, voice acting roles, especially his ongoing identity as Matter in the Cars franchise, philanthropic work, and occasional television projects that required far less travel. While the exhaustion of constant travel was undeniably a factor in his scaled-back schedule, Whitney himself repeatedly emphasized that the deeper catalyst for change was life-stage transformation, marriage, fatherhood, and a shift in personal identity that naturally reshaped both his priorities and his creative output. In interviews, Whitney spoke candidly about the profound impact of starting a family. For a performer who had spent years living at maximum velocity, the arrival of children reframed what counted as important. Late-night sets, endless travel days, and the adrenaline-fueled pace of arena comedy suddenly collided with school routines, family dinners, and the steady responsibilities of being a present, engaged parent. He has said openly that once he became a husband and father, his entire outlook shifted, and the version of the road warrior comic who could grind through 286 days a year was no longer compatible with the life he wanted to lead. This shift in outlook also influenced his artistic decisions. Voice acting, especially his signature role as Mater in Pixar's Cars franchise, became both a creative refuge and a practical solution. The sessions required significantly less travel and offered a stable, family-friendly workflow. In an interview with Looper, Whitney noted that voicing Mater came along at a time when I was changing things around and prioritizing things differently. The character, with his warmth, innocence, and comedic sincerity, aligned perfectly with where Whitney found himself personally. It allowed him to perform without the physical exhaustion of touring, and, importantly, to bring joy to an audience that now included his own children. The role also reflected a shift in his comedic sensibilities. Whitney admitted that his act evolved as he became more embedded in family life. The Larry character, once defined largely by rowdy humor, catchphrases, and a rambunctious adult-targeted comedic edge, softened subtly. He didn't abandon the persona, but he adapted it. Jokes were recalibrated, tone shifted, and he became increasingly aware that a growing portion of his fan base consisted of families and kids who knew him primarily as Mater. Whitney acknowledged that his comedy changed because his responsibilities changed. Being a father and a role model shaped the material he felt comfortable presenting. These comments highlight an important distinction often overlooked in public interpretations of his career slowdown. Whitney did not simply grow tired of the road, nor did he retreat due to burnout alone. Instead, the change represented a broader, holistic recalibration of his life. Professionally, personally, and creatively, he saw himself entering a different phase of adulthood, one where the metrics of success were no longer measured by ticket counts or miles traveled, but by presence, stability, and meaningful connection with his family. This perspective also clarifies why, despite scaling back dramatically, he absolutely did not quit comedy. Instead, he refined his commitments to match the person he had become. Selective touring, limited engagements, voice acting, and philanthropic work allowed him to maintain his artistic identity without sacrificing the aspects of life he now valued most. He still loved the stage, still loved the audience, and still loved the character he built, but he no longer needed the frenetic pace that once defined him. What do you think about Larry the Cable Guy's decision? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.